Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to one and all present here. I'm Shruti Lekha Rajalango, Youth Focal Point WRD UN Women, your host for today. On behalf of the WRD team at UN Women and the YLYP network, I warmly welcome you all to this event, the role of access to digital technology in building women's resilience, young women's and girls' resilience to disasters. As we all know, back in March 2022, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres announced that the United Nations would spearhead new actions to ensure that every person on Earth is protected by early warning systems within 5 years. The resulting early warnings for all Executive Action Plan from 2023 to 2027 called for an adequate framework to integrate a gender-responsive gender perspective in technological evolution, to address the negative impacts of new technologies on women and girls, and to ensure that technology and innovation advance gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls across all other sectors. Indeed, access to technology can help to more easily evaluate and collect data on the impact and situations of gender risks and interests. It can also be instrumental in raising awareness and building women's knowledge on disaster risk reduction, as we will see in one of the presentations by our speakers today. Access to digital technology also has the potential to provide safety and coping mechanisms, especially for women, young women, and girls against gender-based violence during disasters. However, we also recognize that the opportunities of the digital revolution also present a risk of perpetuating existing patterns of gender equality, especially when women are left behind as a result of this digital gender divide. The need for inclusive and transformative technology in digital education is therefore crucial for a sustainable future, particularly for young women and girls. UN Women's Global Disaster Risk Reduction Team and the Youth Leaders and Young Professionals Network are delighted to welcome you to this discussion. In this 1-hour event, we encourage everyone to share your voices and experience with digital technology, particularly challenges that young women and girls continue to face in terms of these and how these can help advance women's, young women's, and girls' resilience to disasters. On this note, I warmly welcome Ms. Jairan Jafarova, the Secretary of Youth Non-Alignment Movement Organization, to deliver the keynote message. Ms. Jafarova was the head organizer of the first full-fledged youth summit of the non-alignment movement in its history, with the participation of youth from 16 member states. She has led multiple youth organizations advocating for intercultural dialogue and social entrepreneurship. Ms. Jafarova also has served as the head of the sector of work with students and student clubs at the Azerbaijan Student Youth Organizations Union for 1 year. Jairan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Trudy, for your warm welcomes. It's my pleasure to have the chance to address to the audience today on this term as in my capacity as a head of secretariat of the youth organization of the non-aligned movement. So it's actually, I'm joining from Azerbaijan, Baku. It's evening here. As you rightly mentioned, maybe for some it's morning, for some it's afternoon. And indeed, this time difference isn't a matter to have an effect on how you are going to enjoy this meeting, these discussions. For example, for some, it's just early morning, they're fresh minds. For some, it's the middle of the work, you know, somehow tired, but for some, such as me, it's the end of the working day. So I know it will be a little bit hard. So why I'm talking about this is that even the time difference is, although we all are here today at the same meeting, but this time difference is actually the difference that makes us enjoy the meeting in a different way. So the world is full of people, and each of us do possess different features, different needs. And these differences actually makes the world way more beautiful to enjoy. But also these differences makes the policy maker's job a bit harder, because, you know, addressing the needs of each and every person is a little bit challenging and time consuming. So that's why usually what policymakers do, they like categorizing. They categorize people into some groups such as women and men, specific policies addressed to women, specific policies addressed to men, or some subcategories such as, I don't know, mid-income women, or I don't know, middle-aged women, and etc. But while addressing to to these general categories, we may unfortunately ignore some of the specifications that each and every person possesses. And that's why usually these policies fail in the long term. They are not that sustainable. So what I'm leading into is actually, let me bring an example to make it more clear. For example, two Azerbaijani, let's say, girls, they're studying in UK. One was born and raised in UK. The other was born and raised in Azerbaijan. Just she is here to study in this university. Would it be okay to address exactly the same policies to these two girls just because they are Azerbaijani? Definitely not. One was born in individualistic, at least society, the other in collectivistic. So the way even English that they use, they perceive, do you understand, is totally different. That means their needs are totally different. So I don't know whether the audience familiar with the concept of intersectionality. If they're not, I strongly recommend you to get familiarized. Also read Patricia Hill if you have any time. So what she explains that, let's say women who is living in urban area and women who is living in urban area and is pregnant should not be put in the same category. You know, you cannot address the same policy. If one policy, general policy for women living in urban area will meet one's needs, it will not be okay for pregnant women also. So you should consider those differences in each and every policy of yours. Unfortunately, in today's world, not all people have the same conditions, same environment that they can develop. For example, in the societies where there is a strong patriarchal values, there are women who are not even led to learn how to swim, how to climb, let's say, right? So, and if there is a disaster happening, such as tsunami, let's say, right? Who will be more likely to survive? The man who has already been taught how to swim, how to climb, or women who never given a chance and access for those skills to be learned? Of course, men who can swim, who can climb up. So these differences actually matters and actually justifies why today women are 14 times more likely than men to die as a result of some disasters, some earthquakes or tsunami or typhoon that are happening all around the globe. Though it's correct that we cannot, unfortunately, overcome the realities that these disasters may anyways happen. But this technology, the innovations that we have in our hand, that we have access, are a great way for us to be able to predict or post disaster terms for rehabilitation. They do help us. But the women who have, great skills of organizing, of lobbying, of informing, it's in the nature. They are not giving a chance in some ways to have an access to those. Those is actually what matters in this world. So that's actually the realities that I wanted to take your attention to. So as NAM Youth Organization, it's really, we are proud that today we have a possibility to address women, those are in need. And it's actually one of the two big, let's say, priorities of ours, one gender equality and another being a climate in our all events that we do organize. And it's great to announce that like some of the members, some of the leaders of the national chapters all around the non-aligned movement states that we do have, let's say, they do have women leaders who are well educated, who have well access interest into technology, and they are promoting those values among their peers all around the, some African countries, they're usually considered underdeveloped, etc. So what I want to conclude this address of mine is that the women have a great actually possibilities in access, and letting women to have an access to ICT means investing in sustainable, disaster resilient communities where both men and women are equally empowered to build an informed and dignified future for not us, for all of us, for the future. Thank you for listening. I hope that I could have, let's say, make you help to give some insight into some interesting concepts from our point of view, and have a voice to talk on behalf of the non-aligned movement member states youth. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jaron, for sharing your valuable inputs on the inequality and differences in differences itself, and how it impacts women and girls very differently, and how important it is for policymakers to consider these inequalities while preparing and building resilience to disasters. So thank you very much. Thank you. Now, I take the pleasure to invite Ms. Devin Zingler, co-chair of NGO-CSW New York's Youth Leader and Young Professionals, who is representing YLYP here today, to share a few words on the leadership, role, and engagement of YLYP using technology as a means to building youth's resilience against disasters and conflicts.
Thanks so much, Ruti, and all of the other organizers and everyone on the call. So I'm one of 3 co-chairs of the YLYPs. Most of you probably know me already. Sorry about my cat. So as the YLYPs, we are a network and a community of young people who are, passionate about gender equality, and specifically, at the UN and in that UN space. And so naturally, we know that there's a necessity of connecting youth networks and youth leaders to the CSW process, but also, gender equality processes, within the UN system, but also outside of the UN system, globally, regionally, nationally, locally, community-based. It's really essential to represent the goals and the ideas and the expertise of younger generations, and engaging with their needs and their concerns, including, in the issue of gender equality and women's rights, but also in all of the other topics and issues that intersect with that. Obviously, we're in this meeting talking about the intersection of gender and technology and disasters. So, there's all of these intersections with all of these different things. We can't silo these issues. They're all really interconnected. And I think it's almost kind of obvious how, this theme of disaster risk reduction and resilience and technology is especially important for youth and youth leaders, because not only are we inheriting, this earth, but also, we all do have, great ideas and expertise to contribute. Specifically with the disaster risk reduction and the technology, we are inheriting this earth that's increasingly relying on technology and digital technology, and that does still have such a big, gap with access to technology, the digital gender divide, but also within the different communities and places around the world. And also, obviously, climate crises and disasters are rapidly increasing, and younger generations are the ones who are going to have to deal with that. Yeah, so we really are the ones who have to take this on, and yeah, so that's why it's so important that like we need to be in the decision-making processes, and we need to be able to share our expertise, because we do have expertise as young people. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to hearing all the other speakers.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Devin, for your remarks. And that's a strong activist voice, and for the leadership you and your team at YLYP has been taking to build capacity and empower women and girls in many ways. So thank you very much. Now our next speaker will deep dive into data collection through the use of technology and protection of digital rights for women, for DRR and the inequalities. Please allow me to introduce to you all Ms. Luisa Franco Machado, who is a feminist data economist in Berlin, Germany, and is an international activist for digital rights and data justice. She's among the 17 new young leaders for sustainable development goals recognized by the United Nations. At age 24, she holds a Master of Public Administration from the London School of Economics and Political Science, and a Master's in New Technologies and Public Policy from Sciences Po Paris. Her research is focused on the connection between technology, feminism, socioeconomic development. They have previously been very inculcative, and has contributed to her work at the UN, OECD, the French government, and the city councils. Luisa, the floor is yours.
Hi, Shruti. Thank you so much for this introduction. Hi, everyone who's here. It's really a pleasure to be in this conference, and I think this topic really speaks closely to my heart. So yeah, let's dig right into it. So my research is a lot about digitalization, datafication, and the impacts this has on vulnerable populations. But what does that mean? What does that mean? And I see that a lot of people that are either involved in digital don't know much about feminism, and people that are in feminism don't know a lot about digital. So I'm kind of trying to bridge this gap. So hopefully this is going to be useful. So when we talk about digitalization and datafication, we see that they really have appeared, to humanitarian emergencies management as really an innovative solution to, some of the main constraints of the sector, especially when we talk about, for example, disaster risk reduction. Sorry, guys, I'm gonna take a sip of water. So, for example, some of the main constraints of the sector, like delivery, upscaling delivery. How do we do that? Improving data collection and analysis. How do we understand who we need to help and when? Even things like biometric verification for giving, humanitarian aid, so on and so on. So this has led to the emergence of a new type of, humanitarianism that we call digital humanitarianism. So it's true, digital technologies, they can deliver relief in humanitarian emergencies, and they really do so in most often, a quick and really cost-effective manner. And innovation can really support in the different phases of, humanitarian action. But it's also true that the increasing use of, this often unregulated digital technologies in humanitarian management, this has not been, free of controversies, and actually can cause quite a lot of harm because of, the pervasive nature of a lot of these technologies, risk of surveillance, concerns over data privacy, consequences of algorithmic bias in artificial intelligence. We can go on and on. But today I'm really going to focus on data collection and how this ends up impacting everything else that comes further. So, as we have heard in the introduction of this conference, which was very well said, that, any sort of, interaction in our society doesn't happen equally to everyone. And this is why it's really important to talk about what we call intersectionality, right? So it's really about, to give a really brief explanation, is about how intersecting characteristics like gender, ethnicity, race, socioeconomic status, sexuality, etc., they play a role on how different groups are impacted by disaster, for example. And what we have seen is that technological interventions, they can both help with this and also potentially cause deeper harm through, the, avoidance of intersectionality in a lot of projects. So yeah, that's why it's really important to understand that, to build the so-called, evidence-based policies that we like to talk about a lot. So if I bring an intersectional feminist lens to humanitarianism, and especially, digital humanitarianism, we understand how capacities and vulnerabilities that are ascribed to women and other gender minorities, they really impact the way that we need to target gender responsiveness in disaster. And we see that a lot of, institutions, they still follow some sort of gender blind approach to humanitarian action. And not a lot of attention actually is given to understanding really the norms that dictate the gender dynamics in emergency settings. And while this, with the lack of really any binding international law, really like regulating the development and the employment of technologies, it really creates a potentially dangerous situation where we're, interacting with vulnerable groups, and we're potentially causing more harm to them. But okay, so now we understand what's, digital humanitarianism, we understand intersectionality. How can we then make this, combine? How can we, what should we do? What's the issue and how we can solve it? With a lot of, we don't know how to solve it, but we can explore how to do it. So, if we analyze data, so we're going to talk about data systems. And if we analyze the systems that are prevalent in digital humanitarianism through an intersectional lens, it's, we can really see how apparently neutral bureaucratic processes like data collection, cleaning, and analysis of data, they really redistribute violence across populations. So, first example, sex disaggregated data. This is something that has been really pushed as, the solution to, like a gender responsive approach to disaster. But what about gender non-conforming people? Like, if we're talking about sex data, or even gender data that follow this kind of like gender binary, then we're kind of like back to the beginning, right? And we're reinforcing oppression. And I mean, for example, even the topic of this conference, when we talk about like women, young women and girls, so what happens to, the other marginalized gender groups? And that's something I see a lot in my work, and that I have to fight a lot, because this is really something that is not very widespread. But even talking about, okay, if we're going to focus on women, talking about things like digital mapping, right? So collecting different data points from, from a population to form a picture, a map of needs or other things. This is very common in disaster risk reduction projects. And understanding it from an intersectional lens, you can also understand how this actually could amplify targeted exclusions and power asymmetries, because we know that, a lot of this is done through crowdsourcing, right? So data crowdsourcing. So basically phone data, on the map, where are you? Like, you're here, your phone describes where you are. Okay, so then systems understand that there's a need of, aid there. But we also know that women and vulnerable groups, the intersection of those, they are less prone to have a cell phone. So how does this impact how we know and how we understand where the need is, and how this also creates this, in the literature we call like digital subalterns. So really someone that's producing data or not, and they don't really own or understand the effects of this data on themselves. Okay, I have to be quick because my time is it's becoming shorter and shorter. But okay, we understand that this is all a problem. We understand that disaggregating data is important, but it's not enough. So what do? It really means that we really have to try to we have to combine quantitative data that, you know, it's like the zeros and one and like the multiple option of the surveys and etc. But also do a really qualitative analysis of what's happening in the location, in, you know, the structures, in the environments that disasters are happening, to really understand the needs. So what to do? And that's the last part of my intervention, I promise. When talking about policy, right? I work a lot with policy, and I hear a lot, you know, that we really have to acknowledge the risk posed by big data. It's true, we do, but how can we go further? So we acknowledge, we all know there is a risk. There are also a lot of benefits. So how do we tackle this, right? So we have to, we have to leverage the very existent and growing numbers of like frameworks for the responsible use of technology with vulnerable populations, but really enforce them and put them in place as a safeguard and not just something that it would be good if you followed. So I think that this is really something that for me is like super, super important. Have intersectionality as one of the main pillars of any action, also to have a more accurate response, right, and direct action. And I don't know, especially when it comes to gender and intersecting characteristics, we have to, we don't have to be afraid of using the term feminist, you know, because I feel like this usually generates a lot of public backlash. But it's still, you know, real change is really only possible if we stop circumventing sensitive topics like gender equality for the sake of, some supposed impartiality, right? So yeah, and of course, to finish, and something that I talked from the beginning as well, like really trying to fight the gender binaries in our organizations and the solutions we develop, because otherwise we might reinforce oppression, and then all of the work that we have done, it's just kind of like useless, or not useless, but it's creating more and more oppression that we're trying to fight. So it's like trying to put water in a glass that's kind of like leaking. So yeah, that's kind of like the very, very short summary of like my research, my work, and everything I've done during the past year. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Luisa, for your valuable inputs, and especially how digital humanitarian and access to digital technology itself, especially during disasters, for different groups and different intersectionality is not often mainstreamed, especially for the inclusion of women and girls and other marginalized groups. Your insights on its urgent need and details are very, very valuable. So thank you so much. We have now heard some examples and experiences that women, particularly youth, have engaged in disaster risk reduction and resilience through the use of technology. Now, I take immense pleasure in welcoming Maria Campuzana Perez from our Women's Resilience to Disasters Program team at Geneva to introduce to you all one of the key tools of UN Women's Resilience to Disasters, or WRD program, which is the WRD Knowledge Hub. Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shruti. I'm not going to share my screen so I can walk you all through the hub. So I believe that the link is on the chat, so you can all have a look. Can you all see my screen? Okay, great. So this is the Women's Resilience to Disasters Knowledge Hub. I'm going to give you a bit of background of how it came to be. So until very recently, the information on gender responsive disaster risk reduction was spread out across platforms, programs, different stakeholders, and that has meant that critical gaps have have emerged, not only in our understanding of the gender dimensions of disasters, but also in the possibilities and the potentials that exist for enabling gender responsive disaster risk reduction and resilience. And it is in this space that obviously information and technology is very crucial. So the hub is the first of its kind. It brings together over 1,600 resources in this one-stop shop that aims to address those knowledge gaps. It places women's leadership center stage and consolidates access to critical information so it's made readily available for everyone. And so it brings key disaster risk reduction and gender actors, policymakers, and practitioners at national, local, national, regional, and global levels. And it shares knowledge, research, and expertise. And I'm gonna now walk you through some key highlights that I would like to feature today. So this is the homepage, and there's also the Explore, Practice, Engage sections. So in the Explore section, we have some insights from experts and from women. And so a lot of these women are part of women's organizations across the countries that the program exists in. And we also have the library that you can filter out publication frameworks, and this is where all the 1600 resources are found. Then there's a policy tracker, which I really like because it identifies gender responsive laws and policies across countries and across regions. And it identifies the inclusion of the 7 high-risk groups identified in the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, as well as LGBTQIQ+ groups that are not part of the framework, but we also include in this policy tracker. Then in the practice section, we have a toolbox that has guidance and training and advocacy materials that you can filter out and also have a look at the WRD topics. There's 18 of them, so you can explore this in your own time. And then in the Engage side, we have a community of practice to maximize knowledge sharing. We also have an expert register with experts from and specialized in all the regions in the world. And then there's also an events register, which includes this event, but there's also lots of others if you want to explore that on your own. And so this ambitious interlinkage has meant that the hub has a huge potential to support women and girls accessing information and technology to build their resilience and to reduce their vulnerabilities. So this is part of UN Women's signature initiative, the Women's Resilience to Disasters Program. And as such, the hub can help advocate and support women being actively engaged in the design, implementation, and use of disaster risk reduction technologies, like the other speakers have mentioned. So it's ultimately the program's thrust that DR efforts are more effective when they're accessible and when they're inclusive, because they address everyone. And as such, the WRD team is working to make this hub more accessible and better used in smartphones. And then I just want to say here that the access to information and technology is essential to enhance women's agency and potentials in disasters. This goes beyond the traditional vulnerability, helpless victim of framing of women. And the International Telecommunications Union has a great report that shows that women accessing accurate information not only affects their own survival, but also that of their communities. And this is true not just for after a disaster happens, but also for like equal access to early warning information, and their leadership in early warning communication is crucial for improved early preparation and risk reduction for everyone in the community. And so the hub really just wants to highlight and bring to the forefront women's leadership that is there, but it seems to exist on the sidelines. And we want to change it, and the hub is a huge tool to change that and bring it to the forefront of conversations and decision-making spaces at the bigger level. And yeah, this is the end of my intervention.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maria, for showing us the Women's Resilience to Disasters Knowledge Hub and its useful features. As a young woman myself, I find that the hub has many useful publications and tools that I can use to educate myself on disaster risk reduction and see how it can be used as a mobilizing agent tool to be more involved as youth in the RR processes and structures. So thank you so much. I now thank all the speakers again for all your valuable inputs. As mentioned earlier, this event is a youth-led space aiming to engage with young people and mobilize the youth on our topic of discussion. With that in mind, we now invite you all to join in an interactive activity through a digital tool called Padlet, which I'm sure most of you might have used. Possibly, where we have a few questions we would like for you to share your thoughts on. Our colleagues now have shared a link to the Padlet in the chat box, or you can see it quickly. Please click the link and it will take you to the Padlet for each question. If you click on the plus button below each of the section, each of the question, it will allow you to place your answers and inputs under the corresponding question. So please feel free to answer as many as questions you would like, and as many as questions you would like. And please also add your name at the end at the last question too. As we will not have enough time to discuss each of the responses, it will be really nice if you can also continue to contribute the responses as much as you can. So I will also, yes, so the link is shared on the chat. Okay, one moment. Great. So I see one answer saying, what are the key contributions that young women and girls could make in terms of increasing women's resilience to the disasters? The inputs are great. Innovation and connection and creativity. I think it's really important to be creative to solutions, as our first speaker also mentioned, the differences itself. So very, very good. Thank you. And yes, what do we need to advance and put in place to protect youth from abuse and violence while using technology in disaster risk reduction? The answer, one of the responses, visibility through technology from major ecosystems at local and national government levels. That's very, very important. The visibility and the access and the equal access to women and girls and also of other marginalized groups. Yes, financial obstacles to technologies, getting education and proactive engagement through digital media could be a very, very strong contribution. Yes, thank you so much. Lack of funding, a very, very huge issue, especially cost due to several inequalities itself. Yes, I think it's very, very important that we make technology accessible to rural girls and women who should and who could equally participate too. I think this is also one of our themes, the review themes of our CSW this year. So, and yes. Yes, I can see that one of the obstacles that one of our participants have mentioned is just not being seen and not being valued into decision making. I think that's a big, big problem. I think the underestimation of someone's input, of the input of women and girls, the input of marginalized groups, I think this is a very big problem, and especially young people also do face this problem in decision making. So thank you so much. Yes, personal preparedness and health. Thank you. And if you move down to the last question, you also have an interesting option to join. You can answer to that too. So thank you so much for that. Yes, great. So we have, thank you so much. So you can please keep adding to this Padlet. It will be active for a while. So if you still have inputs, please continue to do so. So thank you so much. Thank you. So it will be available till tomorrow 10 a.m. Geneva time. In case you still have so many inputs to add, you're more than welcome to add this too, which will help us build a better agenda and mobilize youth for women's resilience to disaster and to contribute to the CSW discussions too. So thank you so much. Now let us take a few minutes to engage with our speakers through a question and answer session. You are all welcome to ask questions or share thoughts and comments to our speakers now by raising your hands using the raise hand function, or if you shall also put in your comments and questions in the chat box, and I shall call your name to unmute and speak, or you could simply write down the comment or question in the chat box. We have the floor open now for question and answers to our speakers today. Yes, so we have one participant, Mary Marvelous.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so my question goes to Louisa. My name is Okukeme Marvelous Moody. I'm based now in Oklahoma, but I'm from Cameroon. I'm a feminist, and I've really worked so much, especially in advocating for the rights of women within the context of the ongoing Anglophone crisis. So I just wish to ask, Louisa, during your presentation, you mentioned how probably in data collection during disasters, women who, for example, have cell phones can easily be identified. And now the big question is, for example, in very rural areas where, women don't have access to mobile phones, what strategies have been put in place to ensure that there could be a way to identify the women and girls that are in that disaster scenario and then easily reach out to help them? I mean, people who are really in rural areas and that can really not have a means to get people out there know that they exist and there is no technology that is there to assist them. So what strategies exist now that could really, be of support to such women and girls? Thank you.
I don't know if I can already answer or should be.
Yeah. Yes, please go. Please go.
Okay, so yes, Mary, thank you so much for your question. I mean, totally, it's really something that I also, highlighted the fact that we tend to, rely on these crowdsourced data, right? So from the cell phone, and then what happens to those who don't have access to the phone, right? So then we have like some sort of like analysis that is not true or not completely accurate, right? So what we would usually, approach is then try to combine both technological solutions with like more analog solutions, right? So really trying to go in the field and identifying, for example, like community leaders that know where, like most of the disasters happen, or there are some areas in the, in the city or in the village that always, flood, they are always like flooded. So these are really the local populations that know, and really to get to this information, you have to make this extra effort that unfortunately in a lot of organizations, it's not possible because of financial reasons, because then it's like too expensive to reach all of these like small villages, right? So then what do we do? I think it's like each organization then comes up with their own strategy, right? So I would assume that it would be most important to really combine. So we get mobile data, but we also talk to community leaders. We also get satellite data, right? That comes like with the satellite and also understands how the population is divided. Understanding other types of data like agriculture data to understand also perhaps if there is a part of the land that is more susceptible to certain, influences, etc. So it's really supposed to be a combined factor, a combined actions that then would direct the responses. But I don't know if anyone else wants to complement that. That would be my answer.
Thank you so much, Louisa. Anybody else would like to add to the question? I also see that there is another interested participant raising hand, and then we will come back to the question in the chat. Sarah Mota.
Thank you, Seruti. Shuti, I'm an ecofeminist based in South Africa. Perhaps it's just a comment for reflection. We're talking about environmental disasters and man-made disasters, such as civil wars, right? Quite often during civil conflicts, the people that are vulnerable, who are majority young women and children, they may not have access to cellular technology, or the insurgent groups could have confiscated such important tools for raising awareness about their plight. And, talking of the context of Congo, which has had this ongoing war around minerals, where millions of women have been violated sexually. And how can this technology, hopefully something in the sky or something in the atmosphere, can be innovated by the young people to be the tool? Because now we know for a fact these wars are here, and beyond being man-made, we currently have floods and a hurricane going on in New Zealand, and here in South Africa, a similar, situation of harsh rainfall conditions, and an earthquake in two of the countries in Turkey and Syria. How these technologies can also project and assist in mitigating. For example, if the technology was correct in reading the climate, it could have alerted the civilians to escape. But it looks like somehow the young people will help us in bringing the solutions. But also in terms of the ongoing conflicts, which are man-made, what we know is that this mineral that enables us to connect here, called coltan or cobalt, is only mined in Congo, and it has sustained this war for over years now. How can young people currently in this platform and beyond continue to mobilize, use mobile technology to advocate and raise awareness on the plight of the vulnerable? Perhaps lastly, access to these technologies requires energy, either engineered through fossil fuels or renewable energy. I see that most countries are backward, because without the energy, the renewable energy to connect these gadgets, the network does not allow us to connect in this way. What is the thinking around that? Thank you so much. It's a beautiful space. I appreciate it. These are just food for thoughts. I don't need answers for now, but I'll leave my email address, and my name is easily Googleable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think these are very, very important thoughts. And I think it's also trying to see what kind of intersection disasters have with conflicts, and also how it is difficult to provide women's resilience to disasters in such conflict situations, which provide a further major obstacles. So thank you so much. Thank you very much. And I would like to now invite Connie Davis.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for the amazing presentation and discussion today. I think the main question I have is probably for Luisa. What efforts are really needed to ensure that the frameworks around digital humanitarianism trickle down into corporate environment, and what kind of work is going on, and how do we get involved as local, state, major technology aggregators to help propel that work forward for these frameworks that are being set? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yes. Thank you so much, Connie, for your question. And I think that definitely it's something I've thought a lot about too. So yeah, how do we take, all of this theory and, put it into action so it can have an actual, effect into vulnerable populations? I think it's, there's never just an easy answer, right? Unfortunately, a lot of these decisions are also political. So, there's a technical framework, but the decision on whether these frameworks will be implemented or not is political, right? So I think this is something that's really important to keep in mind. And then if you are inside an organization, and I can speak from experience, I think that it's really important, at least for now, it's important to, for all of us who are in this field, working in this field, or activists, or just people who care, basically, to also be informed and push that agenda through. I'm always trying to talk to, my supervisors or my colleagues, and kind of like bring in this discussion, because if I don't do, maybe others won't do it either, so I think it's like something that's super hard, and there's no right answer, but the frameworks exist. And I think that it's also, it's kind of like, unfortunately, our goal, I guess, like our need to be informed about them, push for them, raise awareness on that. I don't know, talk to your colleagues, especially if you live or work in disasters regions, or if you live there, to also kind of like push for that into, I don't know, your councils. I've worked also like on city councils and on national governments. This is really something that sometimes actually people don't implement them because they just don't know they exist. Like, unfortunately, this is super common, that people just don't know what to do. They don't know that frameworks exist, and you just have to, like, show them, and then suddenly everything changes. So I think, there's not one answer. It's really many things. So yeah, really about educating ourselves and educating the others, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, I think that's a big knowledge gap, and I'm sure at this space, and this is where tools like our WRD Knowledge Hub can play a huge impact, as it is designed for policymakers, for activists, for institutions. I think the institutional impact, the institutional activism is also very, very important for women's resilience to disaster, because I think it's a huge responsibility beyond simply a social structure. So thank you so much. Now we have two more interested participants. Can we hear from Aftab Runja?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I would like to add a previous question where one of participant asked that in rural communities, especially where girls, women don't have access to mobile phones, internet. So how do we what strategies we use in order to bring them into like circle or bring them into that group at our level? So what being from myself from a rural village, what we did is we established a rural innovation lab with the support of other organizations, where we the lab connects like 4 to 5 different rural villages, where we brought young girls, women, in order to engage them about technology, about innovation, about educate them how about the digital divide. We organize number of digital literacy camp for rural children. So this, I think this is like one of example that how we can educate and connect rural communities, rural girls, rural women. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aftab. Maybe I can direct this a comment into a question also to, which is also mentioned to our speaker Jairan. How do you see that youth networks, especially in such different communities and different inequalities, but how do you see that they can still, particularly young women, be involved in building women's resilience to disasters? And how do you think involvement of technology can help them better mobilize this?
Thank you very much. Actually, I really much enjoyed the conversation, the Q&A session that is going on right now. It's very interesting to dig into this. So coming to our field and the way that we work and what to do to your question. So firstly, I have to say that the region that I am in, also the region that especially the people that I am working with, I don't very often hear the concept of today's issue, that women's resilience to disaster and the role of technology in it, to be hot topic of discussion. Unfortunately, I don't usually hear this. So the first action of ours is to, by holding such events, such informative events in different parts of the world, among different, communities, in order to raise the awareness about this issue. As Luisa rightly mentioned, that sometimes people are not aware of the framework that exists. This is exactly one of the issues that concern me a lot, that sometimes people do not know that such concept actually is studied, such concept actually exists, and people are keen to have an input into this. So the first job of ours, and especially as the youth organization, youth network, to raise the awareness among the youth that are around us, and also the youth in different national chapters of ours, to have this topic into a discussion so that people are aware of it, so people maybe be interested into this, and to have such an action into this. So actually, yes, it's correctly put into question that technology has a great, tool on this, like, because through technology, you have very much good access to knowledge, to information. And the girls, the women who have some constraints, at least if they have access to technology, they may get the information. If they are not, let's say, let to leave the home, with the internet, they can get some information to build themselves, to develop their knowledge onto some issues. So that's why very much agree that the role of technology in this is very essential. Also in terms of raising awareness among the youth. Also, you cannot reach each and every person on earth, right? But through technology, you can educate them, you can raise the awareness. So from this direction, I very much would love to, and from this meeting on, I had a chance to know the people who are expertise in this and who are interested in this. And taking this opportunity, I would love to invite you all to in the preceding meetings that in our capacity we will also like to organize, to involve the, let's say, some Africans, some South Americans, some Southeast Asian countries, the youth from this parts of the world, into the discussion of this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Iran. I think that's a great commitment, and that's a great energy. Thank you so much for your valuable insights as well, to all the speakers. And thank you so much, everybody, and special thanks to all our participants who raised such meaningful questions and inputs. And we would keep going, but unfortunately, we don't have much time to keep continuing such wonderful discussion. We will have more spaces. We promise to have more spaces. To conclude, I now kindly welcome Ms. Cami Adel, our program analyst for disaster risk reduction and women's resilience to disasters at UN Women, to deliver some closing remarks. Cami, please.
Thank you, Shruti. What an amazing discussion, and it was wonderful to hear from so many people who came here and shared with us through this event. And today we've heard about the role of access to digital technology in building young women's and girls' resilience to disasters. And it was wonderful to hear such strong youth voices in this discussion. We began the event with Jaren's keynote speech highlighting the importance of investing equally in women and girls, men and boys' access to technology, which was followed by Devon's discussion on the critical role that technology can play in engaging youth and youth leaders in policy advocacy and decision-making efforts in DRR. Luisa emphasized the need to recognize intersectionalities and gender minorities that would be equally important, and reminded us that technologies are merely tools, not the end goal of our advocacies. And Maria showed us one such tool, which offers a lot of potential in engaging young women and young women leaders and girls in the DRR space. And yet we also see from our responses to the Padlet and even our discussions in the open forum that there remain some obstacles that young women and girls face, and this gender digital divide that could exacerbate existing inequalities and continue to hinder them from effectively participating and leading DRR initiatives, or putting them at risk to possible gender-based violence. So indeed, there is a lot of work that needs to be done. As Ruthie has mentioned, a lot more discussions and spaces that we need to open up. And we look toward using our discussion today, at least, to make sure that these information will be consolidated and reflected in the agreed conclusions that we will be trying to coming up with in the CSW 67 on March. With that said, on behalf of UN Women's Global Disaster Risk Reduction Team and our friends from YLYP, we are immensely grateful for your time and your active participation in this event, and we look forward to keeping in touch and continuing to work with you to advance gender equality for women and girls worldwide. Thank you. Keep sharing your contact details. It's always wonderful to network. As people have mentioned here, we have to collaborate and we have to do it more as we move forward. That said, UN Women and YLYP will be sharing with you a short report on this event, summarizing our discussions here, our asks for CSW 67 and moving forward. And we will also be posting this report and the recording of this event on our event page in the Women's Resilience to Disasters Knowledge Hub. So I'll shortly share with you the link to that event. And yeah, so it's exciting to hear everyone, and thank you once again. Back to you, Ruby.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cami. Thank you for such a wonderful closing remark. Thank you, everybody, once again. And before we close this discussion, it's a wonderful opportunity to take a nice picture or a two or a few. So let's use our digital skills to take some screenshots, some pictures. Yes, so it would be great if as many of you comfortable can please switch on your screens. Okay, we will have 1 minute, giving time for people to get ready. Okay, great. So 3, 2, 1, smile. Perfect. Maybe another 3, 2, 1, smile. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Now I would like to shortly give the floor to Devin for some announcements. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shruti and team. Yeah, just wanted to say again that this was such a great session. Thank you to the speakers, thank you to the organizers. We do have our next youth preparation series event next week, next Wednesday. Next week's event will be at 7 a.m. Eastern, so the time is a little bit different. I will put the registration link in the chat here. Okay, and the session will be hosted by one of our partners. Mifali is the organization. And the session itself will be, it's titled Building a Technology-Friendly Society for Adolescents. So definitely don't miss that. But if you do, as usual, we'll send the recording to our mailing list, same as we will for this session, and post the recording on YouTube. So thank you all again, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All the best to everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot, everyone. It was great.
Thank you. Take care.